Welcome to another FPL video. Today we are rating 12 of your teams, and because so many of you send in your teams and I want to cover as many as possible, we're going to also do another rating your teams video where we're going to rate another 12 teams. So let me know your thoughts about my analysis on all of these teams. Remember, it's just my opinion. I'm not claiming to be an FPL expert. I'm just offering my advice and just, some suggestions on how to improve and kind of giving you an insight into what I kind of like in each of these drafts and what I don't like so much. But let's get straight into it and let's try to get this video to 150 likes. The first team is sent in by Arthur Lowe and I like it a lot. You have a budget-friendly bench which offers a lot of depth as well. I would argue that you have the best budget option in each position. So Neco Williams, as we discussed in the best budget defenders, is one of two of the best 4 million defenders at your disposal. Andres Pereira for me is probably the best 4.5 million midfielder, and Archer is definitely up there in terms of the forwards. Gazzaniga is the most likely to start amongst the 4 million goalkeepers. And you have two captaincy options here with Salah and Haaland. In Gameweek 1, you would easily go for Salah there, and in Gameweek 2, you go for Phelan. With Harry Kane, it becomes a bit more complex because both Salah and Kane have a really good fixture in Gameweek 1, so you could go for either one of them and it can go either way. And you also have some nice differentials such as Callum Wilson, Sancho, and also Robertson, which I really like. And even the fact that you have Saka over Jesus, that is a differential in itself considering Jesus' ridiculous ownership. In terms of the downsides, you have no Spurs coverage, but the thing is, you can't cover every single team, and you're always going to have some flaws. My team has a lot of flaws. Every single team that we're going to cover will have some ways of improving, but I think not having Son or Kane for that Gameweek 1 fixture against Southampton and a really good fixture run for the first 6 game weeks, that could hurt you a little bit, and it's also a nice way of differentiating yourself from those who have Haaland, Jesus, and Salah, who have ridiculous ownerships. Son's ownership is less than 30% and Harry Kane's is around 20%, and I think there are great ways of just gaining rank on those around you. So consider that possibility as well, maybe Kane instead of Haaland. That doesn't mean you have to do it. And another thing is that the defensive line could be slightly improved. I think Cash is one of the best options around 5 million. Ramsdale's one of the best 5 million goalkeepers. Diego Dal is a decent 4.5 million defender, but obviously Robertson and Cancelo, they're two of the best defenders, period. But I think the other three aren't that great, and Neco Williams as your 5th defender, whilst he's fine and he's a budget option, I think there are better defences out there, and a lot of people are putting a lot of emphasis on the defence, and yours does pale in comparison a little bit, but once again, you can't have everything because you have a very solid attack, you've got a good midfield, and a really balanced team overall. So those are just kind of two nitpicks. I would still rate this team very highly, easily an 8.5 out of 10, and possibly even a 9 to be honest. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. This team is sent in by Stephen, and it's also a very good team, very similar level to the first one. And one thing that really stands out is the strong defense. The City double-up in particular is something I really like with Ederson and Cancelo. That's probably one of the best defensive double-ups you can do other than Trent and Robertson, which is more expensive, and also Alisson and Trent, which once again is more expensive. Your attack is solid, and you have Undav as well, which provides you a little bit of depth, which is fine to have, to be honest. I think in previous, rating your team's videos, I was a bit unsure about that, but I do like the Undav pick. I just don't think he's that nailed, but when you have the depth that you have, I think you can get away with it, and you also improve the rest of your squad. You might have some benching headaches from time to time, but it's nothing major, to be fair. And also Bailey and Zinchenko are very good 5 million differentials. I really like those two, and also having Harry Kane there, who you could captain over Salah, but to be honest, you could go for either one of them, as I discussed earlier, and you'd be completely fine. In terms of maybe some ways to improve, I think there are better 8 million midfielders than Luis Diaz. I'm not too convinced with Diaz's returns in pre-season, and also when he joined Liverpool, despite his impact, 4 goals and 3 assists in 13 games in the league so far isn't anything spectacular. And another thing is that I would try to stretch Neto to Martinelli if you can, but to be fair, Neto's in really good form in pre-season, just like Martinelli. 2 goals in 2 games, and he's looking fairly decent. Jimenez is now injured, by the way, for up to a month. He could miss 8 Premier League matches. Will that impact Neto in a positive or negative way? I want to see your thoughts down in the comment section below. I think it kind of goes both ways because Neto should be more nailed now, playing as one of the forwards, but at the same time, he might not have that other striker to bounce off, someone who can hold up the play and play him in behind. So it kind of goes both ways there, and I think this is a really solid draft overall. I would give it a 9 out of 10, but it's very similar level to Arthur, so you could easily give both of them the same rating. Up next, we have Nick Navis' team, and I really like the defensive double-ups for City and Liverpool, even Chelsea to a certain extent, but they do seem in turmoil, and I'd be very unsure about Chelsea, especially defensively, despite the signing of Koulibaly, and I like the double Spurs attack. It might pose a bit of a problem with the captaincy because, for example, if you have Salah and Kane, you can captain Kane in Game Week 1 and then Salah in Game Week 2 when Kane and Spurs face Chelsea. So that's maybe a kind of plus, but also a negative point in that kind of regard. I like the double Spurs attack. It's a really good differential, but kind of a downside of this team overall is they have so many double ups and you're relying a lot on those top 4 teams, which, once again, not the worst thing in the world to be relying on Liverpool, City, Spurs and Chelsea. But if 1 or 2 of those teams have an off day, then you could be suffering a lot in certain game weeks and you really need them to come through for you. And another kind of negative point is the midfield. I think you don't have enough money invested in there. You've got Heung-min Son and Rashford, who I really like, but then having Gordon, Andres Pereira and also Josh Da Silva as the rest of your midfield, that wouldn't really fill me with confidence. And I like having a bit of money invested in that position because you ultimately get the most points there. I have to say, though, I really like the Jesus and Rashford picks. I think they're really good. Rashford's a nice differential. Jesus is owned by a lot of the game, but he's looking so sharp in pre-season. And not just the goals that he's scoring, but also the overall performances are very encouraging. And no Salah or Haaland is definitely going to maybe bite you a little bit, I'd say. Son and Kane kind of mitigate that, but I still think with their ownership and the way they can go crazy in Game Weeks 1 all the way to Game Weeks 10, to be fair, that could really impact you as well. But it's still a good team overall, and I've actually kind of liked it the more I've seen this team because I've seen it a few times. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10 now, but because of those factors that I just mentioned, it kind of stops it from being one of the best teams on display. In my opinion, that doesn't mean I'm right. Your team might still score a lot of points, by the way. I really like the defense and the double ups you have with Spurs. But what you could do is maybe downgrade one of your Chelsea defenders and upgrade your third midfielder there in Gordon, and you'd also have a bit more of a balance and a more flexibility, versatility, and I think your team would be better overall. The next team is sent in by Denver, and it's a very solid team. I think there's just a few players that I would change, but we'll get onto that in a little bit. So what I like is the Kane captaincy. I think that's a fantastic shout, and Kane and Son for me are probably the 2 best captaincy options in Game Week 1, alongside Salah. You could put them in any order you want, really, but Kane is right up there. And you also have a very strong midfield, despite the fact that you have no Son or Salah, and I would try to fit one of them in, but I still think the balance of your midfield is very strong. A possibility you could do is downgrade one of them to a 4.5 million option and then upgrade another 8 million midfielder all the way to Son or Salah, and I think your team would look even better. And you have good depth there with Matty Cash, who could arguably start in your team, really, being on the bench. In terms of how to improve or things that you're missing, no Salah or Haaland once again, but you can't cover everyone, of course. You've also got Doherty, who's at risk because of the signing of Jed Spence, so I'm not too sure about that Doherty pick. And you've got double Chelsea defence, which isn't bad to be fair, but I wouldn't be that convinced from what we've seen in pre-season. And even the summer signings, despite the signing of Koulibaly, I'd still have really big concerns. The James and Chilwell double up I think is a bit better than James and Mendy, and I've said this all along. And look, Mendy's still a great 5 million option and he's still very attractive at that price point, but I'm just not too sure if I double up on Chelsea's defence. And maybe you could go for Ramsdale instead of Mendy, or someone else like Nick Pope, Martinez, etc. And another thing, which is a small point, but it's still worth mentioning, don't vice-captain your goalkeeper. Try to vice-captain someone else like Bukayo Saka, Mason Mount, Maddison, Diaz, Mahrez, whoever it may be, even Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I wouldn't vice-captain a goalkeeper. Other than that, it's a solid team. I would probably give it a 7.5, but you could easily give it the same rating as the last one, and it could be an 8 or above. But I think if you tweak those imperfections, I think you could make this a really solid draft, and you're looking good for Game Week 1. This team is sent in by Ononoy Habibi. What a name, by the way. You've got a balanced team. That's one of the things that really stands out to me. And you've got 2 great captaincy options, as a lot of these teams do, to be fair. But having Salah and Haaland is just a really nice safety net for the first 10 game weeks of the season. And you have a solid defence. Not too many issues there. You've got a bit of depth there with Dalot and Tomiyasu. But in terms of how to improve this, there's no Spurs coverage with either Son, even Perisic, or Harry Kane. And also in terms of the goalkeepers, I think this is the key point here. I would probably upgrade one of them to a 5 million goalkeeper and downgrade the other one to a 4 million. I don't really see the need to have 2 rotating 4.5 million goalkeepers personally, and if I had to pick between those 2 4.5 million options, it probably would be Sanchez. But Raya was better in terms of minutes per point and all of those metrics last season, the saves, the ceiling, compared to Sanchez, despite having fewer minutes. So that's something to consider, and you might disagree with me, and that's fair enough. In terms of Tomiyasu, he is back in training, but I probably would go for Ben White, who's much more likely to start Game Week 1 against Crystal Palace. Let me know what you think of that one. If you disagree, then, I encourage all constructive criticism of my own analysis. This is a solid 8 out of 10, and now let's move on to the next team. On screen, you can see Sammy D's team, and you have a very strong defensive line. The City and Liverpool defensive double-ups, I mean, I can't stress this enough. It's so strong, and it's a really good way of differentiating yourself from the rest. You also have Salah and Kane. It's a great captaincy duo. I mean, there's not many complaints to be had in those areas. However, a way to improve is to maybe minimize the double-ups because, for example, you've got Luca Dean and Bailey, and from Gameweeks 4 to 7, Aston Villa have some awful fixtures, and that's where the likes of Josh Da Silva and Andres Pereira might have to come into your starting 11, which isn't ideal, to be honest. You just want them on your bench and to come on when necessary if someone misses out in your team, and that's what they're there for. But you don't want to actively start them in your team because the likes of Dean and Bailey will be facing some really tough opposition, and their ceiling will probably be very limited there. It's still a really good team, by the way, and I do like that double up for the first 3 game weeks at least, but from game weeks 4 to 7 is something to keep in mind. And I think your midfield is slightly imbalanced once again. I like to have at least maybe 3 options at 6 million and above. You've got Bailey there who might offer really good value for money, and I think he's the best 5 million option as we discussed in the best budget midfielders video. You've also got Martinelli, who's looking so sharp in pre-season with a return in every single game. You've also got Salah, who's one of the best options in the game, if not the very best. Jesus and Kane is a fantastic attacking duo, but I would consider maybe strengthening your midfield a little bit and maybe downgrading one of your defenders such as Luca Dean. This will probably end up being a very popular score today, but I would probably give this an 8 out of 10 as well. And with a few tweaks, this could easily be a 9 out of 10 draft, and it's looking very good. I like some of the differences you have there, such as Nick Pope, and also the double-ups in the defence. Here we have Alexander John's team, and it's very solid. I like the Liverpool triple up. I think it's the best Liverpool triple up you can have, even over someone like Diaz or Nunez, Jota, etc. You also have a very good defense. You've got Tomiyasu in there, and as I said earlier, you could reconsider going from him to another 4.5 million defender, such as Botman or even Ben White. And you've got a great forward duo, just like a lot of these teams do, to be fair. And yeah, I would try to change that Tomiyasu thing, to be honest. And also Raya might not be the best 4.5 million goalkeeper. I personally prefer Robert Sanchez, but Raya does have a great set of fixtures. If you back him to start as well with the signing of Thomas Strakosha, he might be a bit at risk, but if you back him to start, then keep Raya. It's just something that I personally think. You've also got Neto, who's in form, and I'm kind of warming up to the idea of having Neto in my team. I still think he's a bit overrated, as I've discussed in previous videos, but overall, it's looking really solid, and I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. Let me know if there's anything else that you have, any other kind of questions, queries, or maybe 50-50 decisions that you've still yet to decide on. Up next is Carl Prendergast. It's a very good team, very balanced. You've got that City triple up as well, which is very, very rare. Ederson, Cancelo and Mahrez. I really like that, and Mahrez should be more nailed in the Premier League this season. You've also got a good midfield overall. It's solid. It's probably the kind of structure that I'm aiming for. So you have someone like Son or Salah. You've got an 8 million midfielder, which is very important, having that slot in there. You've also got a 6 to 6.5 million midfielder, and also someone like Bailey, around 5 to 5.5 million, that offers you potentially great value. The alternative would be Neto at 500,000 more. You've got a great attacking duo as well. And in terms of how to improve this or things to consider, Chilwell hasn't played much in pre-season, and that might be a bit of a worry. You could go to Reece James as a result if Chilwell doesn't really get any more minutes before game week 1. And also James Justin has potential, but he's very risky. And in one of the pre-season matches, he played as a right centre-back, and that accommodated the likes of Castagna and Ricardo Pereira as the wing-back. So I'd be a bit concerned about Justin, and I might not go for him just yet. I probably would prefer Botman, Dunk, and also Ben White, but he's still a decent option, and I think in the long term he could be fantastic, just like he was in the 2020-21 season. And if you want someone from Leicester, maybe consider Ricardo Pereira, who I think will be a bit more nailed, and he'll be much more likely to start in the right wing-back position. I think Justin can sometimes play on the left and also as a centre-back. Overall, though, I like the captaincy options you have with Harry Kane and Salah, and this is a 9 out of 10 team for me. Some of you may disagree, but I have to say I really like the look of this. I would just probably change Justin and Chilwell, and the rest is fairly good, to be honest. Here we have Eduardinho's team. You've got arguably the best goalkeeper in the game in Alisson. I also have him in my current draft, and you've got a great defence overall. You've also got Maddison, who's one of the best 8 million midfielders in the game for me, despite some kind of tricky opening 5 fixtures. And you've also got Bowen, who I really like, despite the Game Week 1 fixture against Man City. But remember what he did in Game Week 37 last season against City. It doesn't matter who he plays against, he can still get the job done. And you've also got Son captain, which I really like. I would argue he's the number 1 pick in terms of captaincy in Game Week 1. And you also cover Salah well, because I think if you don't have Salah, I would have Heung-min Son. I think he's the only midfielder who can fill that void. void. I know some people are going from Salah to Diaz. I don't think you can cover him that well with the Colombian. And also you've got Bruno Guimaraes, who's one of the best 6 million midfielders, although I think I would prefer Martinelli. If you can go to him, I probably would just go for it. And you've also got Rashford at 6.5 million, you've got Neto at 5.5, so you've got some alternatives there. I'd be a bit concerned about Bruno Guimaraes. I think I'm a bit less keen on him than I was before, but he's still a good pick nonetheless. In terms of how to improve, I would go for another midfielder instead of Bernardo Silva, even Harvey Barnes, for example, or Rashford, as I mentioned earlier, and I'd get Martinelli for Bruno Guimaraes. And I think your attack is a bit inflexible. You've only got one striker there, and he's a really good one on paper at the moment, Gabriel Jesus. But the other ones, you've got Taylor, who's probably one of the best 4.5 million options at the moment. He scored twice in pre-season. And you've got Archer. But I would try to have at least one other medium price forward or even a premium striker, because I think your attack will pale in comparison compared to some who have the likes of Phelan and Kane, and only Jesus. It doesn't really set you up well for that, especially when you have other midfielders like Bruno Guimaraes and Bernardo Silva who will get occasional attacking returns and not enough to really fill that void that you have by having an inflexible attack. But it's still a really good team. I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10, and you've got the platform to have a really good season. On screen you can see Jeff John's team. You've got a good defence. I keep on saying this, don't I? But really, I really mean it. You've got a good defence. You've got a solid midfield as well. I like this structure. And you've got that 8 million midfielder slot covered. And you've got Zinchenko, who could be the best Arsenal defensive coverage overall, even over Ramsdale, Ben White, anyone else you can mention, Tierney, who's back in training. I think your forward line, just like the last team, is a bit inflexible. You've only got Haaland there, who, to be fair, I would rather have Haaland than Jesus. But then you've also got to factor in the rest of your team. And having Parrott and Plange, not too sure about that. I know Luke Plange scored a hat-trick against Ipswich Town in pre-season, but Parrott, you can do much better than that. I would go for Taylor or Archer. I would rather have them if you're looking for another 4.5 million forward, but ideally I would have another medium price forward. So even Mitrovic, Martial's looking pretty good at the moment, so I would consider that and maybe changing things up a little bit, downgrading a defender, for example, and I would probably do that. I'd downgrade Raya as well. You don't need him when you've got Edison, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to start the Brazilian goalkeeper, and you don't need Raya, to be honest. And I think there are better alternatives to Parrott, like I said before. Those are the kind of main reasons or the main ways to improve this team. This is an 8 out of 10 for me, and I think it could easily go up to another level with a few changes. Chris Alfamoso is up next, and this is one of my favourite drafts overall. It's very balanced. That's what really strikes out to me. And you cover all top 6 clubs. You've also got the best budget options on the bench, arguably. Yes, you could say Patterson instead of Neco Williams, or you could say Josh De Silva instead of Andres Pereira, or Lau Taylor instead of Archer, but you generally have the kind of best options or top 2 in each position in the budget options. And in terms of how to improve this team, I think the Aston Villa double up may struggle between game weeks 4 to 7. But to start the season, this draft looks really good, and I can see a lot of points, especially in game week 1. You've got Salah and Kane, 2 great captaincy options. Riyad Mahrez, the main concern would be if he starts week in, week out. But I have to say, I like all of these picks. Just be very careful with the double up in Aston Villa with game weeks 4 to 7 in mind, because those fixtures are absolutely dreadful, and then you'd need someone like Neco Williams, Andres Pereira or Archer to fill in, and I don't think that's ideal. But you can always make those changes later down the line. To start game week 1 though, this is a fantastic build. And before I forget, this is a 9 out of 10 draft. You could arguably give it a 9.5 at least to start the season. The final team in this video is sent in by Jared Phelan, and thank you to everyone who sent in their teams, even those that haven't featured, and I'll try to include as many of you as possible in future installations as well. But in terms of this team, I really like the 3 midfielders you have there, Son, Sancho and Luis Diaz. I think that's great. That's a nice structure. You've also got a great attack. You can't get much better than Haaland and Jesus. And you've also got one of the best goalkeepers in the game, and I think most people would rather have a City spot filled in by Edison rather than Alisson holding a precious Liverpool spot. In terms of how to improve this team, I think there are better alternatives to Diaz, Janssen and Trippier to start the season. They're not bad choices, and Trippier is playing a really offensive role during pre-season, but I still think there are better options. I mean, look at Newcastle facing Man City and Liverpool in the first 5 game weeks, and to have a defender at 5 million, that isn't ideal. You have the kind of depth to cover that, but I think you could organise your team a little bit better there. And Diego Dallo isn't the best 4.5 million defender in my opinion, but he's still certainly an interesting one. And I wouldn't want to start with Ramsey and Dewsbury Hall in your team. I think they're 2 of the best budget midfielders, but I wouldn't want to start the season with them. And you could even go for Diaz and Janssen in your own squad to start over those two. So I would give this team a 7.5 out of 10. And all of these ratings are obviously subjective. The main thing to take away is the analysis, the ways to improve, the good things about these teams, and maybe the not so good things, and also some other kind of factors to take into account that we don't always consider when making our Gameweek 1 teams. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to 200 likes, and we're on the road to 15,000 subscribers, so it'd be very much appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and you can also become a patron or a channel member. The links are in the description below. The same goes for the Discord server and the FPL League, so check the description there and you will have everything you need. Take care, enjoy the rest of your summer break, and all the best of luck for Gameweek 1, and I'll see you next time.